Everyone, Matt here from Docs Running, and today we're going to do a comparison review of the Puma Fast R2 Nitro Elite and the Puma Fast R1 Nitro Elite. So these are both Puma's long distance racing shoes, or at least they're supposed to be Puma's long distance racing shoe. We'll talk about how they actually perform. Version 1 was pretty crazy when it hit the market, kind of some geometry that we hadn't really seen before. Version 2 kind of built on that with increased stack height and some other changes that we'll talk about that changed the ride, but still keeps the function surprisingly similar. So the goal of this review is to compare, if you like the Fast R1, is the Fast R2 comparable, or is it something different? So let's talk about that so you can help decide whether you wanted to upgrade or which one might work better for you. So first of all, coming in at stats, the Fast R1 was coming in at 7.5 ounces for men's size 9, 6.1 ounces for women's size 8. The Fast R2 comes in at 8.4 ounces for men's size 9, 7.4 ounces for women's size 8. The Fast R1 stack height comes in at 35 millimeters in the heel, 27 on the forefoot for an 8 millimeter drop. The Fast R2 comes in at a much higher drop, coming in at 40 millimeters in the heel, 32 in the forefoot for an 8 millimeter drop. Same drop, just they increase the stack height quite a bit. Starting at the midsole, although the geometries might look really similar, other than this forefoot here, the foams are actually quite different. So there's EVA in the heel on the Fast R1, a bio-based P-backs in the forefoot, which felt really good to get up on your toes. In version 2, there's this new thing called Nitro Foam Elite, which is some kind of new combination of super foam that Puma hasn't really been clear about, but it's now present in both the heel and the midfoot, which makes for much smoother heel landings and much less awkward transitions. That was the big thing on the ride in the first one, is that if you started getting on your heel, it's kind of slappy, and it wasn't the most comfortable for longer distances. The version 2 fixes that because now you've got more stack height in the heel and much softer ride in the back. So it's got a good amount of bounce and roll forwards. So if you're a rear foot striker, the second version is going to probably work a lot better for you. If you're a rear foot striker here, this may not work. If you're a forefoot striker, this version might work a little bit better because, again, you're not going to use the heel. You don't have to worry about that. And it's lighter. Which brings me to the next point. The weight is apparent when you're walking around, so I can even feel it holding these. About an ounce increase in version 2 over version 1. When you do start running, though, that becomes less apparent just because the foam is so much more bouncy and the transition is much smoother. Do I still feel the gap here? Yes, I do. This gap was way more apparent. This one is less apparent, but it's still there. And Puma, I would love to see you actually fill this in just a little bit, even a teeny bit, to make it feel a little more continuous. But if that's something that bothers you, you're fine. It's just something I'm aware of, but hasn't really bothered me. The other thing that's really different about the ride is this extended plate. So the first version does not have that, which makes for a smooth and really great toe off. And it's not that this is uncomfortable, but it's definitely noticeable in version 2. So when you extend the plate like this, it increases the lever arm, which basically means you're going to toe off later, and that's going to put a lot more work through your calves. If you're someone that is really ankle dominant, meaning you really push off and produce a lot of your propulsion through your ankle and calf, this is going to be a great shoe for you because it's going to really play to your strengths. If you're not someone that does that, or if you're someone that when you get to longer distances, your calves tend to fatigue, this is not going to be the best option, which for me, I tend to use a lot of ankle and hip, and then when my ankle fatigues, I want to be able to use my hip more, so I've noticed that both these, and this one especially, works better when I'm running way faster for tempo runs. It feels probably better in version 2, to be honest with you, than version 1, just because I tend to get more on my heels, a little more clunky. But as I got into longer distances, this tended to make my calves pretty sore, not super sore, but decently sore after tempo runs and longer effort, pretty much everything, but especially after tempo runs, because it feels like as I got tired, it was just fighting the shoe just a little bit rather than having the really nice smooth toe off over here. If that's something you like, that's going to be great. And where I really liked it was actually running faster. So when I was doing faster fartleks or hill sprints or things like that, this felt great. It felt really good to toe off this. It made it feel like I could really push off a lot harder, which was awesome. But when it comes to long run efficiency, these are not going to be my favorite options unless you're a forefoot striker over here, or unless you're really ankle dominant. So that's kind of where this limits me, where I think for the first version, I wouldn't take this beyond a 10K for me personally. The second version, I would consider taking up to a half marathon, but not a marathon personally just for me. I would probably take for something that is a little bit more efficient over the forefoot, just because I don't want this extended thing, and I want to be able to save some energy for my calves, which is the whole point of having a plate and a forefoot rocker that lines up with your mechanics rather than being shifted forward. It makes sense to do that if you're running faster for shorter distances, but the weird thing is they increased the weight here, so it's kind of counterintuitive. Some people that might not bother. For me, I do want kind of lighter. That's a personal thing, so I get it. It's still a smooth ride. The heel transition is so much better than the last version. There's just some mechanics in the forefoot that are really going to, depending on who you are and how you push off, are going to affect whether you're going to like this shoe. The upper is the other thing that I really want to talk about before I talk about stability, which has also changed a little bit. Both these have fairly low volume uppers. I will say that getting version 2 on is actually harder than getting version 1 on. And that's probably because I have 100 miles on these and it's broken in. But the volume in both these, especially version 2, is really, really low. It's very snug. It's not that it's narrow. It's just, it sits really low across your foot. So if you have a higher volume foot, this is probably not going to work. But if you have a normal volume foot or low volume foot, and even if a little bit extra width, this is going to be totally fine for you. The other thing I got to know is this is a little worse on version 2. You do need to wear longer socks. This thing did rip through my ankle. I didn't really have that much of an issue with version 1 on that, but I just had a little rubbing. Version 2 definitely had that, so you have to wear longer socks. And I will say this heel counter thing is that, or spoiler, whatever you want to call this, is a little bit more present. There's still plenty of flexibility everywhere else, and it is flexible. I just felt a lot more pressure on my heel bone in it, not in a bad way. It didn't cause any pain, but it was like I was aware of it. So those people that are really sensitive to that, this may put a little bit of pressure there and it might need some time to break in, or it may not work. So definitely try these on before you commit to racing and buying them. Last thing I will say about the stability is that stability has decreased a little bit. So in version 1, you got the mild sidewalls here, the slight firmness in the heel did increase the stability just a little bit. Still a fairly neutral shoe, but again, a little bit more firm things are a little bit more stable. The softer heel does decrease that a little bit, and then and especially with nothing being here and being softer, I do collapse a little bit more. It didn't really bother me that much. I could still do runs up to 10 miles, didn't have any problem, but I think beyond that, especially marathon distance, I personally, someone who needs a little bit more stability, would not choose this for longer efforts. You're going to need to have a little bit more stable mechanics, unless you need it in the forefoot, because the forefoot is actually awesome because it's really wide. Definitely feels much wider. Sorry if I can do this correctly. It is much wider than version 1. There's a lot of sole flare. There are sidewalls up in the forefoot, kind of back here, and then the stiffness of the plate really, especially being more medial, kind of pulls you out a little bit more lateral. So if you need forefoot stability, the second version is going to be a lot better. And I think they did a great job there, but it's very neutral in the heel and midfoot. So if you need stability there, this may not be the best option. And it's just a slight decrease from the heel in midfoot in the version 1, but the forefoot stability or guidance, I should probably say, is much better in version 2. So 2 shoes that there's a lot of upgrades and differences between them, but they end up actually functioning somewhat similar in terms of their race instances. I hope this review helped you kind of decide which one might be better for you. I'm still getting miles on version 2. I've got 30 plus miles on them. I'm going to try to get them to 100 and see how this plate tends to continue to perform. But until then, we're going to have a lot more reviews and I'll continue to get miles on all this stuff. And I hope you stick around to see more stuff.